Hello and welcome to Intercoast College Online. I am Dr. Tony Scuderi. I will be your instructor for this course on culture, race, and gender considerations. This is for the alcohol and drug counseling portion, AD 133. So let's begin talking about culture, race, and gender. This is going to be a compilation of several ideas and PowerPoints that I've discovered and some research that I've done on this, and I hope it's helpful to you. I call this Gender, Race, and Culture and White Privilege, the Menace to Society. So let's start. I'm following our website sources to this PowerPoint, so I'd like to give acknowledgement to these nice folks that have put their time and efforts. The first is Yoakum Mbutsukis, PhD, Assistant Professor of Child and Adolescent Studies, Acting Associate Dean of Student Success, the College of Health and Human Development. PPT, Understanding Privilege and Opposition, at muskie.usm.maine.edu. Understanding Privilege and Oppression, Social Status, using themselves as the model of humanity for the purpose of legitimizing white power and privilege. And I'd like to quote the sources in www.refinethemind.com, Embracing Diversity, and also www.diversityjournal.com, 1471, Moving from Diversity to Inclusion. And then Tiffany Jana, CEO at TMI Consulting, and Aaron Thompson, Professor of Sociology at Eastern Kentucky University and author with Joe Corazon, Diversity and the College Experience. So I hope you can go online and find all the PowerPoints that these wonderful individuals have put in and what I would be using a good bit of my information from. So what is diversity? Let's begin with that. Let's begin with the basics. When we talk about diversity, a lot of people think that, oh, it's a very simple thing to be defined, but diversity is not that simple. Diversity is differences in racial and ethnic, socioeconomic, geographic, and academic professional backgrounds. People with different options and backgrounds, degrees, social experiences, religious beliefs, political beliefs, sexual orientations, heritage, and life experience. It's a little bit of everything is cultural diversity. It's what makes us who we are, the differences and the similarities between us. Unfortunately, when we're looking at cultural diversity, one of the things that we also see in society is fear. Fear is a big thing because a lot of racism, a lot of prejudice, a lot of unrest, and a lot of issues that people come up with. The diagram here shows for a cake. It's kind of like if you have a cake, you've got all these different ingredients. But yet when you take the cake, and I like to bake and cook myself, and I know for a fact that when you take all these ingredients and you mix them together just right, oh, the outcome is absolutely marvelous. Well, the same thing happens with culture. You have the diversity of cultures, you have the diversity of people. I don't care if you're white, if you're black, if you're Mexican, if you're Asian, it doesn't matter. You take all of these and you put them together with the right mix, and we call that right mix humanity, human sense, kindness, love, compassion, tolerance. We have diversity. Diversity, we learn from each other. If we can't learn from each other, then we have some issues. So diversity means more than just acknowledging and or tolerating differences. It means a lot more than that. It's a set of conscious practices. So we have to practice being diverse. Yeah, we do. And we have to knowingly know what these are. One of these is understanding and appreciating interdependence of humanity, cultures, and the natural environment. So an understanding. So there's a knowledge. One of the things I tell people when I teach them how to be counselors and therapists, treat the patient, don't treat the disease, treat the patient, right? By treating the patient, one of the best things that you can do is get to know your patient, get to know your client. Spend some time, spend a couple sessions talking to the patient. If you don't know or understand their culture or something about them, ask them. Ask them. Get to know them. Have a conversation. Therapy should not just be, hi, how can I help you? Well, do this and do that and take care of this and say no to drugs and don't drink and don't drive. It's got to be more than that. You've got to understand where the person is. They're human beings. It's interdependence. They come together. They link together. We link together through humanity, who we are as people, through our cultures. One culture is different from another culture, and that's a beautiful thing if you really take a look at it. It doesn't mean that my culture is going to take over your culture. It doesn't mean that in the least. What it basically means is my culture is different from yours. And maybe both of our cultures together, hey, we can do something totally new. It's kind of like writing a dissertation. My professors told me many, many years ago, everything that's ever been written has been written. All you have to do in your dissertation and whenever you write a book or whenever you do anything is take what somebody else has done, come up with a new fresh idea, back up your fresh idea with their knowledge, and you have a whole new idea. Well, it's the same thing with culture. You back up culture with your knowledge, with your understanding, with who you are and who they are, and you blend them together, you have a beautiful culture. You have a beautiful thing that happens. And it's the natural environment. It's where we live. Face it, folks, we're all different. We're all different. And that's a wonderful thing if we take a look at the differences between us. The differences between us can be very exciting. We don't need to make it him against him or her against her, or us against them. How about we together, without fear, without malice? Practicing mutual respect for qualities and experiences that are different from our own. Understanding that diversity includes not only ways of being, but also ways of knowing. Recognizing that personal, cultural, and institutionalized discrimination creates and sustains privileges for some while creating and sustaining disadvantages for others. Building alliances across differences so that we can work together to eradicate all forms of discrimination. Let me break this down for you a little bit here, okay? So, practicing mutual respect for qualities and experiences. The qualities and experiences that are different. They're different from our own. Qualities and experiences. Things that make us who we are and how they're made. We're not judging good, bad, or indifferent. It's passion. It's that flow of what's happening inside us. It's the quality. It's how I can relate to you and you can relate to me. And we can get together because you're different from me, yet you're the same. We all breathe. We're all called human. We all bleed the same way. God knows we go to the bathroom through the same orifices, right? There's a lot of things that are the same. We all have heart, lungs, kidney, spleen, liver, pancreas, everything. The only difference is the way we think and maybe the pigmentation of our skin. Other than that, we are who we are. Understanding that diversity includes not only ways of being, but ways of knowing. Not only who we are, but diversity is ways of knowing. Let me tell you something. Knowledge is power, and power is knowledge, right? How do we know? I don't know everything. I got 3 doctorates. Right? I have 3 doctorates. People sit there and say, oh my God, you're brilliant. You spent all that money, all that time in education and learning. You want to know something? Let me tell you something right now, okay? I don't know a thing. Am I smart? Yeah, I'm smart. I'm not going to deny that. But you know what my doctorates taught me? My doctorates taught me what I don't know. And they taught me how to research. That's the beauty of it. How to research, how to look at things that are different, right? Ways of knowing, not always ways of being. Ways of existing, that's being, existence. Being is a verb, it shows movement. Knowledge is also a verb, it shows movement. It shows who we are. Recognizing that personal, cultural, and institutionalized discrimination creates and sustains privileges for some, while creating and sustaining disadvantages for others. So cultural and institutionalized discrimination. What we say to hurt other people, either culturally or institutionally, in our jobs, our schools, our neighborhoods, our offices, our homes, institutionally, right? Creates and keeps disadvantages. It keeps disadvantages. It keeps people away from us. While other people, as they create these discriminatory behaviors, it becomes very advantageous for them because now they have the upper hand. They can push people away. They can take people, they can sit there and say, no, I'm better than you. Why? Because I say I am. And there's not a thing you can do about it. You're not better than me. You're a different color than me. You're a different culture than me. Mine is the best. Mine is the best. Really? Is it the best? Or is it just one out of many? What is this? What's this thing that we call culture? Building alliances across differences so that we can work together. Building alliances. We don't need to separate. We don't need to call ourselves privileged because I own this and you don't. Right? We can work together. We can get rid of discrimination if we want to get rid of it. If we want to get rid of it. My contention is I think discrimination is fear-based. That's not rocket science. I think it's fear-based. You're different from me. I'm afraid of you. And the more you tell me, I'm not afraid of you, you're lying. Because if you weren't afraid of me because of my race, my color, my gender, if you weren't afraid of me, you'd work with me. You wouldn't thwart me. You wouldn't push me away. You wouldn't call me names. You wouldn't marginalize me. You wouldn't pigeonhole me. You wouldn't really care because we'd work together. But because I scare you, because I threaten you, because God forbid, I may be smarter than you. I may take your job from you. I may take your livelihood from you. I may take your wife from you. I may take your husband from you. I may take your children from you. All of this that comes together is an issue. So what is diversity? Diversity are people that often relate to race and sometimes gender, and are more recently sexually oriented. I think this is a pretty narrow view of what diversity means. It can also be ways of thinking and your intellectual background and your training as well. But diversity is how we relate to one another, racially, sexually, psychologically, spiritually. This causes differences between us all. Who am I? What am I? Where am I in relation to you? And I'm different from you. And that's okay. There was a book written many years ago. I think it was Eric Berne, the psychologist. It was called I'm okay, you're okay. Well, that's what cultural diversity is. Cultural diversity is okay. And I'm okay, and you're okay with it. We just need to work it together. Diversity, diversity, diversity. Let's learn from each other instead of separate from each other. So, we talk a lot about inclusion when we talk about diversity. What is inclusion? Well, by definition, it involves bringing together and harnessing diverse forces and resources in a way that is beneficial. Inclusion puts the concept and practice of diversity into action by creating an environment of involvement, respect, and connection, where the richness of ideas, backgrounds, and perspectives are harnessed to create business values and overall success. In other words, we make the mixture work. That's inclusion. Taking everything that we have and putting it together and making it work. This is what makes a business flow. This is what makes a school flow. This is what makes humanity flow, these differences, and including all these differences and mixing them up together and creating something really, really, really different and really, really good. I like when I cook to try new things. Sometimes it's a hit, sometimes it's a miss. But that's how you learn. Mix a little bit of this, mix a little bit of that, put this together, you take a look at a picture, and you sit there and you say, hey, this works, right? It's a mixture of different things, and it comes up with a different taste. Remember the dissertation. Everything is written. So you take an idea, and you read on the idea, and you have your own thoughts on that idea, and now you express those thoughts and you back them up. Well, diversity and inclusion is the same thing. It pulls things together. It's a driving force and the resources that are beneficial for humanity and beneficial universally, seriously. You know, it creates an environment where we're all involved. That's inclusion. We include her. We don't push people away. That's exclusion. That's the problem with society. You're black, you go over here. You're white, you go over here. You're Asian, you're back there. You're Jewish, you're over here. You're Italian, you're over here. Don't interact with each other. Stay with your own culture. That's called marginalization. Stay with your own kind. Well, we are with our own kind. Our own kind is called humanity. We include one another. So what's the difference between diversity and inclusion? What does that look like? Well, diversity is simply a representation of many different types of people. Many different types of people. You've got races, you've got genders, you've got religion, you've got all these different things, the abilities of people. All different. No one is the same. That's diverse. That's diverse. Everybody is different. Diversity often focuses on differences. It's the mix, as we call it. It is the mix. Inclusion is the deliberate act of welcoming diversity and creating an environment. We welcome these differences. That's inclusion. We don't push them away. Come on in, join us. We welcome it. Where all different kinds of people can thrive, can succeed, and can be exactly what they need to be. Inclusion is the act of making the mix work. It works. It does what it's supposed to do, right? Diversity is what you have. Inclusion is what you do with what you have, right? Simply having a diverse group, a diverse team, a diverse workforce, a classroom is just not enough. You gotta feel safe in that environment. If you don't feel safe in that environment, we have a problem. We need to be encouraged in that environment. We need to fully participate in that environment. We need to share and we need to be on equal footing. Share and have equal footing, just like everybody else has it. That is diversity. That's where you take inclusion, all these differences, and you pull them together. And as you pull these differences together, You have a whole new mix. You have a whole new idea. You have a whole new story. And you want to know something? We're all the author. It's not just you. It's not just me. It's us. It's a collaboration. That's diversity. And it includes everyone. It leaves no one out. Why does diversity work? How does it work? Diversity expands worldliness. College might be the first time you've had the opportunity to have a real interaction with people from diverse groups. I know it was for me. When I went to college the first time back in 1977, it was the first time I was away from my white middle-class society. I was brought up in South Philadelphia, born in South Philly. Eventually I moved up to Northeast Philadelphia. Went to grade school in an all-white Catholic school. Went to high school in an all-white Catholic high school. Graduated high school, all of a sudden I went to a college right outside Philadelphia in an area called Bucks County. All of a sudden I look around and it's like, wow, you ain't white. You ain't white. Neither are you. And the worst part about it is I was brought up in a very, very prejudicial family. Men were men and women were women. We all had our place. Well, let me tell you something about our place. 1977, the first time I found out, believe it or not, a woman could be a doctor. Can you believe that? A woman could be a doctor. I was never brought up that. My physicians, my doctors were all men. And my father and my mother never really said, oh, a woman can be this way. I got two older brothers. I got no sisters. What an eye-opener that was for me back then. And it's been great ever since. Because you know what I learned? It doesn't matter. It is what it is. Diversity enhances social development. Interacting with people from a variety of groups widens your social circles by expanding the pool of people with whom you can associate and develop relationships, and besides associate and develop relationships, you can learn from. I've been to 6 colleges, 6 universities, from my associates to my 3rd doctorate. And every one of those colleges, especially in my seminary years, I happen to be an archbishop, but I was raised Roman Catholic at the time. I'm a Catholic archbishop, but not Roman Catholic. Another story, another time. But just let it suffice that when I was in the seminary, I went to this place called Catholic Theological Union in Chicago. And it was called Theological Union. It was with a consortium of schools. We could go to school with the Lutherans, with the Jewish, with the Methodists, right? With the Episcopalians. And then at CTU, the diversity was just tremendous. We had people from Africa, Australia, Germany, Italy, France, Poland, United States, Asia. Oh my God. We would sit down and we would discuss not only theology, but politics. I learned so much in those 4 years. And then in subsequent universities, I went to one in Virginia. I went to one in California. I did some work correspondence-wise via internet out in the UK. Wow, it opened up a whole new world for me. Why? Because I had this relationship that I developed with other people, and I learned from them. My ideas changed. My life grew. I was not pigeonholed, and I didn't pigeonhole anybody. This is cultural diversity. This is what we need to do, what we need to understand. Diversity prepares students for future careers and success. It will prepare you in a diverse population for your career as a drug and alcohol counselor. Or different if you choose another path, that's up to you. But that's going to lead to your success. It's also what Intercoast is about, success, your success, creating success. My motto for Intercoast, change a life one mind at a time. Change a culture one mind at a time. Successful performance in today's diverse workforce requires sensitivity to human differences and the ability to relate to people from different cultures and backgrounds. When you get out in the clinic and you start treating patients, don't expect to treat somebody of your race, your religion, because that's not going to happen. You may get lucky and have somebody there, but you're going to treat people that are a different color than you, a different way of thinking than you, different way of living than you. And if you push them away, the hurting, as we would say in Hebrew, the anuim, the lowly, the poor, the outcast, you push them away, get out of the field. We don't need you. We really don't need you. Embrace diversity, embrace cultures, let it embrace you. Diversity prepares you for working in a global society. Don't think just your clinic, because the people that you touch every day are going to touch somebody else, and that's going to expand into something else. So when you work with somebody culturally, you're going to find yourself working with employers, employees, patients, co-workers, customers, clients, all with diverse backgrounds. Some are going to be Muslim, some are going to be Hispanic, some are going to be Jewish, some are going to be Catholic, some are going to be Italian, some are going to be Polish, some are going to be whatever. Put the stuff that you had, put your baggage to the side. And if you can't put your baggage to the side, please go see a therapist. Before you touch a patient, go see a therapist. I hope you don't touch a patient. But before you deal with the patient, go see a therapist. Get your own baggage dumped and open your heart and open your mind to a new experience, to a new life. Why does diversity matter? Why does it matter? It matters because interactions with people different from ourselves increases our knowledge base, and that it does. I know throughout my years in college and university, the more interaction I had with diverse people, the more I would challenge myself to be a better human being, a better person, a better scholar. And as a therapist, and as a drug and alcohol counselor, oh my God, that just opened up my whole life. I became one of the finest, open to people. I don't care where you came from. Carl Rogers, the great therapist of client-centered theory, unconditional positive regard was one of his biggest achievements as far as I'm concerned. Unconditional positive regard. Hate the sin, love the sinner. I don't care what you did, I care who you are. I can work with what you did, but more so, I can embrace who you are unconditionally. I'm not going to judge what you did because of your race, your creed, your color, your national origin. I don't care. Who are you, the person? And how can I, who's going to serve you, work with you, embrace you, the person? Research constantly shows that what we learn more from people who are different from us than we do from people who are similar to us. I can learn more from somebody who's different from me than learning somebody who's just like me. That makes perfect sense to me. Why would I? It's even biblical, What am I going to learn from somebody who I already like? I learn from people who I don't like because it tells me what I don't like about me. It's called countertransference. And then by looking at that, I have the privilege and the opportunity to take a good hard look at myself and sit there and say, what is it about this person that I don't like? What is it about me that I don't like? Carl Jung called this the shadow side of the personality, where when we connect with people And all of a sudden, we can walk into a room filled with people, and our eye goes to this one individual. We don't even know the person's name, but we can't stand them. I'm sure everybody out there has had an experience like that. That's called hooking the shadow side of the personality. What Jung said is when we do that, basically what we're doing is there's a spiritual connection between that side of us that we don't like and that side of the person that's manifesting itself, to paraphrase. So basically the things I don't like in myself, I'm seeing that person. So the narcissist out there that I can't stand. Why? I'm a narcissist. Healthy or unhealthy, right? The person out there that's boisterous, right? What don't I like? I can be boisterous, and I don't like that. I really don't. It's when you embrace these things and you recognize them and you take the fear out of them, for heaven's sake. You can take an unhealthy narcissist and turn him into a healthy narcissist. You can take someone that's boisterous and calm them down a little bit. Teach them what it's like. And how do you do this? Interact with other people. They're different from us, but yet they're similar to us. Diversity promotes creative thinking. It expands our capacity for viewing issues or problems from multiple perspective angles and vantage points. That's what the diversity does. If we look at diversity, we can take a look at how we view things other than our own perspective. And we can take that view and we can tailor our perspective based on that other view. Doesn't mean we get rid of our view. It means we expand on it, we build on it, we come up with a new view. Again, the dissertation. Everything is written. I'm just giving you a new view on it based on what's there. So here I am, right? You may not like me the way I lecture, the way I talk to you. You know, because I'm a bit chubby. You may not like me. That's okay. I may meet you and sit there and say, I like you. There's some things I don't, but I like you. And as I get to know you, I sit there and say, boy, I really like this part about you. I can take that part and I can assimilate it into me. So now this becomes this plus a bit of you. And now I become a different person. Every day makes me a different person. Every time I interact with somebody, it makes me a different person. Every time. And that's the beauty of it. Diversity enhances my own self-awareness, your own self-awareness. Learning from people whose backgrounds and experiences are different from your own makes us more aware of who we are. And sometimes it's uncomfortable. Sometimes it's a very uncomfortable place to be. But it sharpens that self-knowledge, it sharpens that self-insight. It allows us to compare and contrast my life and my life experiences with your life and your life experiences. And I can see what I like and what I dislike. And then I can take that and I can mold it and shape it with others whose life experiences differ sharply than mine. That's exciting. That's diversity. That's diversity. Diversity enriches and multiplies perspective. You know, we call this a liberal arts education. You know, what does that mean? Well, you learn a little bit of everything. That's liberal. A little English, a little science, a little geography, a little math, you know. And of course, whatever your field is. It's diverse. Even in colleges and schools, we have this diversity. Yeah, and we're forced to learn it, you know, within our curriculum. And we may sit there and say, well, what do I got to learn this for? I remember history. You know, in my associate's degree, I played the banjo, and we were studying early Philadelphia history. And my professor asked me, "Hey, would you mind coming down to this? We're having a luncheon at a place called Pensbury Manor, was one of the houses of William Penn. And, this would be great if you could play your banjo. And I said, sure, why not? What the heck? Right? I'm a showman. Hey. So I took my banjo down, wore my little stuff and my little skimmer hat and my, ruffled shirt. Back then we had ruffled shirts, right? My two little garters on my sleeve, my black pants and bow tie. And I'm over there doing my thing, playing my chord melody and all this stuff. And they just, were applauding all this, great for the ego. So then we had lunch. And this is where it really gets good. I'm thinking to myself, what the heck do I have to study history for? I'm never going to use this. What do I got to learn about the Revolutionary War for? What do I have to learn about the War of 1812? What do I have to learn about the Spanish-American War? Oh, the Civil War, it's a waste of time. I know what that was about, right? So I'm sitting down there with these professors at lunch. And that's all they're talking about. Oh, what do you think about the War of 1812 when this happened and that happened? Let me tell you, I thought they were speaking a foreign language. I couldn't tell you how embarrassed I was. I couldn't wait till I was done eating and ready to do my second set. I went back the next day to school and I sat there and the professor asked me, so Tony, what'd you think of it? I said, I enjoyed myself until lunch. What happened at lunch? I says, I have no idea what these folks were talking about. And I said to him, I said, I am so sorry for not doing well in this class. But you're doing fine in the class. I said, no, I'm only getting a C. I said, I need to pull that up to an A. I said, because, man, I can't believe it. I never thought I'd use this stuff. I got a B minus. That's okay. But boy, did I learn. And from that day on, every opportunity, I never sat there and said at that point, why do I have to study this crap? Why? Because somewhere along the line, you're going to use it. That's diversity. That's what we're talking about. It's a multiple perspective. And it's something that's going to be used in the future. It's just a wonderful, wonderful thing. So it increases our knowledge base. Research shows us that we learn more from people who are different from us than we do from people who are similar to us. Just as you think harder when you encounter new material in a college course, you'll do the same when you interact with a diverse group of people. Oh, isn't that true? The harder you think, the more material you have, the more you're going to understand, the more you're going to know. Well, it's the same thing when working with diverse cultures, right? So diversity promotes creative thinking. It expands your capacity for viewing issues, for viewing problems, for understanding what the problems are, right? Really big. Multiple perspectives, multiple angles, vantage points. Diverse vantage points work to your advantage when you encounter new problems in different contexts and situations. Rather than viewing the world through a single focus lens, you're able to expand your views and consider multiple options when making decisions and weighing issues. Morality and ethics. Two big things when we're dealing with cultural diversity. What's moral? What's ethical? A lot of us think the white middle class way is the moral and ethical way to do it. We're the majority population and this is what you got to do to be a person. And you've got to be white, male, middle class. Who says, well, some crazy people in society that think they have power. And the more power that people give them, the more right they are. Not saying remove the power, I'm saying diversify the power. Get an understanding of what they're talking about. Let's make decisions. Let's weigh issues based on your ideas and my ideas. Socrates, the great Greek philosopher. Socrates. Did you ever hear the Socratic way of teaching? What Socrates did with his students is he would sit there in a circle with them, and he'd be sitting over there on his little stone or whatever they sat on back then, and he'd ask the students a question. Why is this tree green? And the students would say, well, it's not only green, but it's also brown. We've got chloroplast and chloroform and, C55, H72, O5, N4, MGMN, that's chloroplast. We've got that, and that's what makes it green, and that's what takes it there. And then you got the, through photosynthesis, and they're talking about it, and the next thing you know, the student asks them a question. Well, why does the tree have roots? And they go back and forth, question, answer, question, answer, question, answer. That's the Socratic way of learning. Great knowledge is learned that way. I'm not saying you can't get knowledge from a book, but it's more from just a book. You read the book. Now let's talk about what was said in the book. I'm sorry, I'm not one for written tests. I think tests are crap. I really do. Written tests are garbage. Because all they do is they ask you what you know at that present moment. It doesn't tap into your knowledge base. It taps into what you've memorized. Any test, I don't care if it's a board test, a licensing test, or a test in your seat, they're all crap as far as I'm concerned. They don't measure what you know. They measure what they want you to know. Diversity, cultural diversity, measures what we all know through our interactions with one another. It allows our minds to expand. It doesn't pigeonhole us, right? It allows us to make decisions, to weigh issues. What's right, what's wrong, what's ethical for all of us. Diversity enhances self-awareness. Learning from people whose backgrounds and experiences differ from your own cheapens your self-knowledge and self-insight by allowing you to compare and contrast your life experience with others whose life experiences differ sharply from your own. By being more self-aware, you are more capable of making informed decisions about your academic, your professional, and your personal future. It enhances who you are. Diversity enhances your self-awareness. What do you want to become? What do you want to be? How can you help me be better? How can I help you be better? I have my ideas of what it is to be a psychologist. I have my ideas of what it is to be a drug and alcohol counselor. I have my ideas of what it is to be a musician. I have my ideas of what it is to be clergy. Well, that's wonderful. They're all my ideas. That and 50 cents will get you a cup of coffee here in the classroom. Right? I'm not interested in that. I'm interested in what are our ideas. This is my idea of what it is to be a psychologist, etc. What are your ideas? Oh, wow, they're a little bit different from mine. So maybe I could take some of your idea, incorporate into my idea, which will make me a better teacher, a better drug and alcohol counselor, a better musician, a better priest. Wow, amazing, isn't it? Geez. Self-awareness. I've got quirks. I've got issues. You're trying to tell me that I'm strange because of some of the things that I do. Well, what about you? Now we got to fight. That's also part of cultural diversity, called cultural stupidity. Right? It doesn't mean that you insult somebody. Because sometimes when we talk to one another, we see our own flaws, we see our own faults, we see our own issues, our own problems. And that's a good thing. That's a little embarrassing, but it's a good thing. Because if we're smart enough, if we're ethical and moral enough, right, we'll understand that by you either pointing these things out consciously or unconsciously, and if I take a look at this and embody it, turn it in and put it inside me, I can change who I am. I can make myself different. If I yell at somebody, I'm going to get their attention. It's like if you yell at somebody. But I want to get their attention for that moment. After that moment, they're going to try to avoid me like the plague, just like I'm sure people tend to avoid you. Right? But if all of a sudden I learn, if I start yelling, this is going to happen. What if I were to just pull back my yelling, learn some vocabulary in a different way other than curse words and stuff, but learn a good vocabulary and approach the person in a tone that's different from what they're used to hearing? I wonder what kind of results I'd get. It was amazing when I worked at San Quentin State Prison. I was one of the staff psychologists and developed several programs at that place. I worked with the guys on death row. Tough group of people. Very tough group of people. But you want to know something? They protect me. Can you imagine that? Why did they protect me? and they could care less about some of the other clinicians over there. I'm going to tell you why. And I told them, I'd walk into that place and I would start right as I get into the sally port, into this large courtyard area before I'd go into the row. I'd sit there and I'd say a prayer every morning. I'd say, God, please help these people teach me what they need and bless them all. Regardless of what they did, keep them safe and let me be an instrument of your peace. And I would walk into the prison. And I would talk to the guys and I would learn from them and I would listen to them, the gang members, the rapists, the murderers, the child molesters. I would listen to them, not judging, I would listen to them. And then when I would be in therapy with them, in their group process, in their group therapy, and I would see some little anger stemming between the two that I knew could be very volatile very quickly, I would sit there and say, wait a minute, these are the gang members. According to your code, doesn't it work this way? And according to your code of conduct, doesn't it work this way? And if you have this and I'd be talking to them in their language and trying to blend things together, and they'd look at me and they'd say, Scuderi, hey, how do you know about this? I said, because I want to learn about you. Because, and this is where I got them, because this is your home and I'm a visitor here. And whenever I walk from that sally port to here, and I think about you guys, I know that you're inviting me to your house. Because I can walk out of here at the end of the day and I go into my world, which is different from yours, but this is your world. And I don't know your world. And the only way I can be welcomed into your world, I would tell the guys, is if you invite me. So if I ask you, may I come to your house, which is what they used to call their cells, their house. Can I come to your house? If you tell me no, I'm going to respect that for the day. I know I can just walk right up to the house and sit there and say, hey, come over to the front, and you come to the front. But I won't do that to you because this is your world. That's how I treat people. And it was amazing. When I started to spread that in the lectures I used to give occasionally to the clinicians and to the staff, and they started to try, the crime rate in prison dropped significantly. And I never told them why. But they changed. The inmates changed. When I left in 2012, I don't know what happened since then, right? We had a big crisis in California, and the budget went south, and 28,000 of us got laid off. And I was like, okay, fine, whatever. But for that little moment of time, I got to know the guys. They were in the right place, a good number of them. Some of them should never have been there, in the first place. After reading their files and talking to them, But anyway, self-awareness was the whole reason for that. I understood it. Diversity enriches multiple perspectives. It diversifies, magnifies power. It helps us to free ourselves, to liberate ourselves from tunnel vision. It gives us a panoramic view, a very broad view, a very broad perspective of who we are, where we are in the world around us. It gives us the ability to move freely. Right? Now, how do we embrace our diversity? Right? Everyone's narrative. Consider your own life. Everything that you shaped, your beliefs. Realize that each of the 7 billion people on this planet has their own narrative. We all are different. All of us. I'm different from you, you're different from me. I got a different story from you, you've got a different story from me. It's all different. And that's good. Could you imagine what this world would be like if everybody was like you? I don't want to talk about it. Where are you coming from? When you find yourself thinking poorly of someone, stop and consider what influences have created your negative views of that individual. What created those views? For some people, it's intergenerational. They were brought up with racism. They were brought up with prejudice. They were brought up with their way of thinking. And it's gotten to be a habit. Befriend all people. If you know that you tend to avoid befriending certain types of people, find them, find them, find them, find them. I'm going to say it again, find them. Find those people that you don't want to be friends with, and at least talk to them. You may find that they are worthless to you, unfortunately. Or you may find, wow, is it them that I'm afraid of, or is it me? Empathy. When you encounter anyone, try to imagine, try to understand, try to sympathize with the person's story, with everything that has made them who they are. There is a difference between empathy and sympathy. Sympathy is feeling sorry for somebody. I don't want you to feel sorry for somebody, right? I don't. I don't want you to feel sorry for me, and I'm certainly not going to feel sorry for you. All I ask you to do is walk a mile in my moccasins, like the Native Americans would say. You want to get to know somebody? Walk a mile in their moccasins. Don't judge someone unless you've walked a mile in their moccasins. What does that mean? Walk in their shoes. Enter into their pain. I'm not African American, obviously. I don't know what it is to be African American. I am married to an African American woman. 25 years, this is 2019, so this will be 26 years come August. 26 years. You want to know something? I'm still learning about her. I don't know what it is to be black. And I even wonder if she knows what it is to be white. But we can coexist with one another because we're constantly trying to understand and evolve a relationship with one another. Yeah, do we have problems? Do we argue? Do we fuss? Do we fight? That's what kept us alive for 25 years, 26 years. Yeah, that keeps us going, right? But we also know how to make up and understand one another because we're diverse. She doesn't like the white community for the most part, and I can understand perfectly why. Between the racism that she's had to put up with throughout her life and the issues that she's had to put up with, yeah, I can understand that. And it's okay. Just as long as she likes me, that's fine. But it's not being sympathetic. I'm walking a mile in her shoes. And she's walking a mile in mine. Actively accept. Mediate upon embracing other people with all of the diversity that comes with them. Don't allow yourself to define a person based upon one stereotype or one aspect of their complex identity. And how many of us do that on a daily basis? We see somebody wearing a burqa, right? How many of us think terrorist? We see a black man walking down the street. How many of us think criminal? We see a white man walking down the street. How many of us think, oh, he's all right? Blonde-haired, blue-eyed, well-developed, well-shaped woman. How many of us sit there and say, yeah, that's the American way? Well, what about the rest of the cultures? What about the one that's not that attractive, doesn't meet that criteria, maybe a different color? Wears a turban, chapeau, right? I've got this, this little outfit every once in a while when it rains that I wear. It's a nice raincoat, right? London fog raincoat. Love London fog raincoats. And I got a chapeau, brown hat, right? And I wear it with my brown raincoat. I look like a gangster. I look like somebody from the 1920s. And then when I throw the South Philly swag on, I say to them, yo, how you doing? What's up? How are you? Yeah, the name's Scuderi. Nice to meet you. You have a nice day. Right? People get a kick out of it. People laugh. Oh, man, you're just like a gangster. Yeah, well, why? Why? Because I'm wearing a trench coat and a hat. So you're judging me because I'm wearing a trench coat and a chapeau, a derby, a hat. That's stupid. You know nothing of my intellect. You know nothing of my talents, nothing of my gifts. What you know is because of the South Philly accent that I have, because I'm wearing a chapeau, and because I got a raincoat. So I'm an OG, an old gangster. And you love it, and you get a kick out of it. Then when I take this stuff off, and I stand in front of you in the classroom and sit there and say, well, let me explain to you how this works. And you listen, it's like, wow, that ain't a gangster. Holy smoke. Now what do? Well, you enter into yourself and you become who you are. You accept yourself, and you accept me. Accept the things you cannot change, and change the things that you can. And the only thing that you can change is yourself. The only thing I can change is myself. Other than that, I have to accept you for who you are. You have to accept me for who I am. We have to accept each other. Walk a mile in our shoes. Let's see what happens. Show compassion. Perform random acts of kindness. It's biblical. An ark. Yeah, no one on the ark. Right? Did you ever see ARC? A-R-C? Acts of random kindness. A-R-K. Acts of random kindness. Not A-R-C, A-R-K. Acts of random kindness. Right? Perform acts of kindness for all types of people. It can be as simple as a smile or holding open a door. How many times do we walk by the street person? Why? Oh, they're all drug addicts. We all know that, right? Or they're all alcoholics. Or they just want a handout. They're lazy. You know? Oh, they smell. But that one hears voices. He's yelling at something. God knows what he's yelling at. Her? Oh, man. Man, boy, well, she's on drugs. Just take a look at that. We come with preconceived notions based on our own fears, based on our own concepts, based on our own cultural narratives. How are we brought up? How do we view people? We may not have the buck that they want, the $2 that they want, but maybe, hi, how you doing today? I'm as guilty as everybody else. Sometimes I just walk away from them, usually out of embarrassment because I don't have anything to give them. And sometimes, yeah, because they do stink. I'm not perfect. But at the same time, we all have to understand that we need to show compassion. We need to show compassion to one another, to work with and to care with one another. So the beauty of diversity, what is it? Well, the human race is extraordinarily diverse in so many ways: gender, ethnicity, race, class, religion, nationality, sexuality, philosophy, lifestyle, everything. We're different, and the list is endless. Yet, at a basic level, we're all the same human species. We experience highs, we experience lows, we strive to be happy, we want to be fulfilled. Our common pains and joys are what bring us together. Our diversity makes us unique. It's what deems us our own special person, one who has never existed and will never exist again. When I die, that's it. There ain't going to be another Tony Scuderi, thank God. When you die, there's not going to be another you, thank God. Why? Because if there was, life wouldn't be the same. We are unique. We're here for a short period of time. We need to take that uniqueness and we need to bring that uniqueness to fruition. My uniqueness needs to join with your uniqueness. Because once we're gone, what are we going to leave behind? We're not going to know. We're going to be dead and buried 6 feet under and 2 weeks later. But somebody may remember us. Diversity in culture. Diversity, the wide range of differences among people, families, community based on their culture and ethnic backgrounds, as well as physical and academic abilities. Culture is socially transmitted ways of thinking, believing, feeling, acting within a group of people that are passed from one generation to the next. Cultural diversity is intergenerational. We become culturally diverse. We become culturally stagnated by the way that we are born and raised, and we can change that. We can change that. We have to make a cognitive choice, and sometimes it's a painful choice, but we have to make that choice to change. based on who we are, based on how we were grown. So as we take a look at culture and diversity, it includes socioeconomic status, ethnicity, race, religion, language, gender, orientation, academic, physical abilities, age, geography. All these things influence us. All these things make us who we are. Children learn how to think, feel, speak, and behave through culture. Through the culture that they're raised. Children learn how to do that. You want to raise a racist child? You can raise a racist child, and they'll raise racist children, and their children's children will raise racist children. The chain's got to break somewhere. It's got to break. If we take a look at things intergenerationally and diversely, we can see where the flaws in the links are, and we can break that flaw, and we can start the chain in a whole new venue, a whole new way of doing this. Marcia Linehan, in dialectical behavioral therapy, she does a lot of stuff for borderline personality disorders, and there's two things I really like about her theory. One of them is the thing that she has with chain analysis. In the chain analysis, you have to go, here's your end behavior. This is what got you in trouble. Now, what was the thing you thought about and did right before that? And then right before that, and then right before that. And you put all these links together up to as far as you can remember. Because whatever you did back here got you over here. And if somewhere along the link, somewhere over here, you can find that little weak link that sits there and says, now if I change this to this, it's going to go in a different direction, which is going to make the outcome over here totally different. And how do you do it? She's got another cute thing called mindfulness exercises. You say in the right here and now, you interact with what you've got right here and you accept it. And then when you accept it, you work through it and you take a look at the links in the chain, you sit here and you say, I didn't accept it here, I need to change it to this. And then if something else comes along the way from the end point and tries to disrupt your change, you can easily change it again by staying in the moment. That's a beautiful thing. And we can teach our children this. We can teach our children this. How do you feel? How do you speak? They mimic us. If we call somebody a vulgarity, you think that little kid at age 6 or 7 is going to sit there and say, oh, Dad, they're not this. They're a nice guy. And I don't think that's going to happen. I think they're going to sit there and they're going to laugh. And then what's going to happen is when they go out and they see somebody of that persuasion or whatever it may be, and they're going to sit there and they're going to call them that vulgar word. And they're going to want to get into a fight. And it's just going to reinforce the vulgarity, and it's just going to reinforce the cultural problems. But if they're taught we're all equal, we should begin to interact with one another and understand one another and give due justice to one another where justice is due, not because of race or ethnicity, but because this is what you did wrong and this is where you belong. Right? We call that justice. Justice and equality. Culture and society. Well, everyone has the same biological and psychological needs, but the ways in which we meet those needs is determined by culture. We all have the same things. We all need to eat, we all need to sleep, we all need to have sex, we all need to go to the bathroom, we all have these needs. How we meet them is different. And this is why diversity is so important, right? Because it can be very exciting depending on how we do it. Culture is learned. It's not just plopped in there. It's learned. It's shared. It's adopted. It's dynamic. Dynamic means it keeps moving. It's learned through enculturation. Different cultures come together and we learn how to blend. If we go to cognitive behavioral therapy, change the thought, change the behavior. If we change the way we think, we're going to change the behavior that we have. If we think one way in the culture and it's causing cultural uprising, we change that thought. We change that thought, then we have to change our behavior. You can't change a behavior without changing the way you think. If you change the thought, you change the behavior. You change the thought, you change the behavior, then the action changes and the culture changes. So if you're not used to being diverse, if you're not used to accepting somebody because they're black, they're white, they're Muslim, they're Asian, change the thought. Tell me some ways that you can accept them. Tell me some ways that you can accept yourself to accept them. And once you find ways to accept yourself, to accept that individual, then you approach that individual with a different mindset. And as you make that mindset different, then that behavior changes, and now they accept you, you accept them, and it moves on to the next level. That's diversity. That's cultural learning. That's where it happens. Dominant and mainstream cultures, what does that have to do with it? Well, the most financially successful families have grown up in or adopted cultural capital. This is one of the issues that we look at. So many low-income families have similar values, but not the finances to support a similar lifestyle. But not all families do. So in one that we call that a silver spoon, born with a silver spoon, financially successful families grow up in financially successful communities. Money buys into money. So low-income families have similar values. They want to buy into the same thing, but they're not as successful sometimes, right? But not the finances. So I want to adopt your values. I don't have billions of dollars. My name's not Carnegie, right? I don't have money given to me, but what I do have is myself, which is more precious than money. And I can give that to you. Will you give yourself to me? I don't need your money. I don't need your dollars. I need you. Here I am. That's diversity. That's mastering. Mass media and international communications create a universal culture. TV and movies teach a common culture, and they do. We mirror what we see on TV. It's horrible what we see on TV in the year 2019. I'm sorry, folks, it is. Maybe I am an old fogey. You know, when I was growing up, I hated those black and white movies. I wouldn't watch Fred Astaire, Ginger Rogers. I wouldn't watch those, oh, there's these two people, it's black and white, oh, it's terrible. I want to see something in color. What am I watching here? Bunch of people dancing around, jeez, right? Here I am, 60 years old in 2019, looking at this stuff, and I'm seeing, what we got on TV. Every program you see on these movie channels, violence. Even a superhero movie, violence. Nobody's holding one another anymore. Nobody's dancing with one another anymore. Nobody's smiling and looking in the eyes of one another and showing affection and love and dancing the dance to try to get the person to fall in love with you. No, not anymore. Beat the living daylights out of somebody. Ooh, that's really cool. Yeah, let's take a gun and blow their brains out. Wow, this is really, oh, did you see that? Boy, the guy took the sword and sliced his guts wide open. Yeah, you should see the blood come out of his mouth. Boy, this is great. Yeah, oh, brother. I don't need to see that. But yet, that's what culture is seeing. So now the acceptable thing is to watch that garbage. And all of the video games that we see, for the most part, are the same thing. Call it Armor, whatever it's called. Come on. So that's creating a culture within itself. Sure, we can embrace some of that, get a little excitement going, a little action going. Sure, why not? Hey, I'm a judo player. I used to do that forever. 40 some odd years on the judo mats. Get a little action going, throw some people around. It's great. Ooh, it is. It's wonderful. Nice little thing to do. But it's not everything. Then we have what's known as a microculture, right? So 1/3 of the nation's students, if we take a look at academics, are students of color, soon to be 40% in 2020 and half by 2050. Already a minority in California, Texas, and the nation's largest cities. So it looks like that 1/3 of the nation's students are going to be students of color in 2020 and 20 through 2050. So that's next year. And we're already starting to see how the white culture, how the white population is really starting to kick for dominance. Right now we have somebody in the White House, the president of the White House, that wants to build this wall between Mexico and the United States. And he's trying to get people to pay for it, to foot the bill. We're kicking and screaming. Others are sitting there saying, no, take the money. Whatever happens at this day, I have no idea. But why? We got to keep our borders safe. Well, let me tell you something, man. It doesn't matter if you build a wall or not. The bad guys are going to find a way to crawl under the wall or go to the edge of the continent and swim around and come in that way or fly over it. We'll find a way. Power is a key in understanding dominant culture and microculture group relations. Who has the power? How's it used? And how's it controlled? These are some of the questions. When we take a look at education and diversity, concerns about equality and inequality, the intersection of race, ethnicity, gender, and class as they relate to individuals and group identity. Well, socioeconomic status, the economic condition of the individual, is based on their or their parents' income, occupation, and educational attainment. I'm amazed when I hear people sit there and say, well, my kid's got to go to college and I've got to foot the bill. Excuse me, you got to foot the bill? Really? Well, maybe you do. Maybe that's the way of culture. Maybe that's the way we have to do it in this generation. When I went to school, my dad and my mom helped me a little bit, very little bit. I got loans and I worked. And what I wound up doing is when I graduated, I started paying the loans off before I graduated. So by the time I was out of my first master's degree, I had a $3,000 bill that I had to pay off. Only $3,000. I had an associate's, a bachelor's, and my master's, 3 degrees. I only had $3,000. I paid that off with my summer job. My summer job, I was a lifeguard, and I took $3,000 and paid it off. Then for my second master's, that was the seminary. I didn't have to pay anything for that. And then my doctorates, I paid as I went along. My parents didn't pay for me. I paid as I went along. If I couldn't pay, I didn't go. That's my way of doing it. It doesn't have to be your way. It's my way. And I'm not condemning parents that can foot the bill. I'm not condemning that at all. But what I'm saying is it's just a different way. You learn how to appreciate things differently if you're getting paid for it or if you pay for it. So socioeconomic status, what does it teach you? Self-sufficiency or not? That's also diversity. Then we talk about assimilation, a process by which an immigrant or culturally distinct group is incorporated or brought into the dominant culture. This is assimilation. So somebody from the old country, my parents are first generation Americans. I'm second generation. My grandparents, from what I understand, who I never knew, came from Sicily, Messina, Palermo, Catania. They didn't speak English. They came over and they went to Ellis Island, did that Ellis Island bit, and eventually migrated into Philadelphia region in South Philly, where my parents were born, I was born, raised, all that stuff, right? And what we had to do is we had to take that culture from Italy, from Sicily, and we had to enculturate that. We had to bring it over here. So the things that my parents did in Sicily, or also my grandparents did in Sicily, well, they got together in their cultural group. So they got other people from Sicily and Italy and that culture, and they formed a little group of community in South Philadelphia. So a lot of the Italian culture was in South Philadelphia. And then from there, the American culture came in. They said, well, you can't do this, you can't do that. This doesn't fit, that doesn't fit. So they took their Italian culture and they brought it here. And some of the culture's still the same. Part of it was Sunday. Sunday would always have spaghetti and macaroni with gravy. Spaghetti and gravy and meatballs. So you learn how to do these things. The Chinese came over, right? Had a beautiful Chinese New Year celebration. It's not January 1st. But boy, did you ever go to a Chinese New Year celebration? Ow, it's beautiful. And the dragons down the street, the costumes and the fireworks and all this. You know, diversity. Immigration, culture, distinct groups are brought together. The first step is learning the cultural patterns of the dominant groups, and the final stage is structural assimilation, interacting with the dominant groups at all levels, including marriage. One of the saddest things that I encountered when I moved to California from Philadelphia, amongst many things, but I worked for this Asian recovery service out in San Francisco. And some of my patients were Asian Americans, 20s, 30-year-olds, the ones that were over here. And they were having such a difficult problem, and I asked many of my patients at the time what that problem was. Oh, grandma and grandpa want to keep their old Chinese ways, and I don't want to do that because I'm American and I'm proud to be an American. They got to abandon it. We always get into fights and arguments. So they get into fights and arguments with their grandparents. God bless them, that come from the old country with their culture. And then they come over here with a difficult way because it's a new language and they don't speak American, they don't speak American English, right? They speak Chinese, Mandarin, Cantonese, right? And they want to take their old culture and bring it over here, and their children's children are having a problem with that. They don't want other people to see their grandparents because they're so old culture. Oh, I remember those days. And I would sit there and say, why are you fighting with them? Why not do this? Why not assimilate? Why not take their culture, take your culture, and blend them both together? So you have 2 New Years, right? You have 2 different seasons, different foods. So they want to greet you in a different way. The birthday celebrations are different. The marriages are different. The funerals are different. So what? It's okay. It's not going to bite you, but it's not American. No, it's not. So what do you say with that? Melting pot theory describes the egalitarian state as a core value of democracy. People of color, because of racist ideologies, preventing from melting or becoming structurally assimilated. The United States was built as a melting pot. All cultures come in. All of them come in. And as you come in, share your culture with us. And let's blend it together and make it our own. And so you can take Mexican, Asian, and Italian, pull them together, and have an American culture based on that. Nothing says that, what is American? It's a combination of a lot of stuff. The guiding principle, acculturation, learning of the dominant culture through immersion is the prevailing strategy. So you're immersed in the culture. I don't speak any languages. I keep, telling people, how many languages you speak? 2 of them, English and street. I'm really good with street language too, both of them, right? I don't speak a foreign language. I wish to God I did. Every time I tried to learn it, people would make fun of me, my pronunciations and all that, and I just stopped after a while. Very discouraging. I wish somebody would have come over and says, Tony, come here. Let me teach you how this is done. I really wish they would have, but they didn't. Acculturation is learning of the dominant culture through immersion and through prevention. Cultural deficient theory blames those who don't fit with deficiencies in their home environment. Single parents, teenage moms. If it don't fit, then you throw it out. And that's a problem. It doesn't fit, it doesn't belong. It doesn't belong, you're a problem. Pluralism, the maintenance of cultures, is parallel and equal to the dominance in society. So societies which maintain distinct cultural patterns, including languages, values, and promote pluralism currently in the United States, is not one of these societies because parity and equality between groups is not valued. So, you want to bring everything together, but because society doesn't value it, there we have some issues, right? Public schools, for example, generally teach only the dominant culture. I mean, it doesn't have to be public schools. When I grew up in a Catholic school, it was the same thing, right? And the dominant culture was white, middle-class American male. Done. Like I said, I didn't know anything about the African American culture, right? I didn't see a person of color, believe it or not, until I was close to 15. Such a disgrace. And then when I saw my first person of color, I was scared. And that makes it even worse. So, cultural choice. The freedom to choose and adapt the culture, characteristics from one's own and other culture in developing one's own cultural identity. Let's share. Let's be happy. That's cultural choice. I get to choose. Nobody tells me. I get to choose. I get to adapt the culture. So if I'm Italian and I come over, and in this country here it could be anything. So I can be in Idaho. So I'm an Italian Idahoan. It's a lot different from an Italian South Philadelphian. I get to choose. Knowing when it's appropriate to use patterns of each culture, your own culture and the one that you grow in. Many people of color are acculturated, but discrimination keeps them from being structurally assimilated, even if they want it. Strong identity with their cultural groups provides solidarity to combat inequalities. What a shame that is. Imagine that. People of color have to hang around people of color just to be identified as people of color and to be celebrated for who they are. White people can't do that. Ooh, they're different from me. But yet I demand that they assimilate into my culture. That's a problem. That's a huge problem. So then we go into socioeconomic status. So social stratification, the different levels of society, of social class, is based on income, education, occupation, wealth, and power. And if I can keep you down, I'm going to keep you down. I'm going to make sure that my wealth, my power, my education is greater than yours. Because God forbid, if your education is greater than mine, I may have to be below you. Higher or lower ranking, not just based on socioeconomic status criteria, but race, age, gender, religion, disability, contributions to society. It's not who we are, it's what we do. So now we went from a person to who we are, to what we are, to now what we do. And that's going to tell us culturally how we rank in society. And that puts prejudice in it. That puts racial pressure on it. That puts diversity in it. Class structure. The working class, the middle class, the upper middle class, the upper class, the upper class, the lower middle class, all these classes. I tell you, if they were in here and this was the classes, they'd all fail. You know, every last one of them. Class structure. From those that work to those that don't work because of disabilities. And unfortunately, in this culture, people with disabilities, people in lower class, they can be thrown away as far as some people are concerned. They don't want to help them. They don't want to do anything with them. I know somebody that sits there and says that it is immoral. Get this, you ready? It's immoral to care for those that are in poverty. It is immoral, they say. It is immoral for somebody to support somebody in anything other than an upper class. The lower class people, the middle class people, let them die, quote unquote, from that individual. What a mentality. Poverty. $18,104 for a family of four. 31.1 million people in the United States live in poverty. That's 11% of the people today, 2019. 16% of children, double that of most other major industrialized nations, live in poverty. 68% of those living in poverty are white. Only 9% of whites live below the poverty line. Race and ethnicity. Race and ethnicity are linked, but are not the same thing. Race is not accepted as a scientific concept, but as a social construction for identifying differences. That's what race is. Society comes up with that. Instead of calling us people, they call us black people, white people, Chinese people. Skin color is a signifier of race, but many states declared a person non-white historically if they had any percentage of non-white heritage. So a person of non-white historically, if they had any percentage, this used to be called, back in the Civil War times, the drop of blood theory. If you had one drop of blood in you that was anything other than white, that's what you are. So if you have one drop of blood because you had relations with an African American, then you weren't white, you were black. If you had one drop of blood that was Chinese, you're not white, you're Chinese. And one drop of blood in you that was Mexican, you ain't white, you're Mexican. Wow, talk about marginalization. Talk about privilege. You know, that's horrible. Whites seldom think of color for themselves. White has become the norm. So many whites have trouble understanding white privilege. Of course they do. It scares the hell out of them. National origin is the primary determinant of ethnicity. Where do you come from? Right? I'm not white, I'm Italian. I'm not white, I'm Mexican. I'm white, I'm American. 58% identify with a single ancestry. I identify myself as Italian. I'm Italian American, but my line from both sides, mom and dad are Italian. Right? Sicilian. That's even closer. 22% with multiple ancestries. 20% don't identify with an ancestry. Right? The groups that are most oppressed in this country are those who are indigenous or whose ancestors entered the country involuntarily. Then we have language diversity. Educators need to recognize that miscommunications between themselves and students may be due to inaccurate decoding rather than lack of linguistic ability. The way that I interpret what you say, I run into this all the time, could be problematic. Even at home, sometimes it's problematic. I may say things one way and the wife may say things another way. And of course, she's right. You know, she's the psychiatrist of the family, so she's definitely right, you know. Happy wife, happy life. Love you, babe. Learning English may take young people only a couple of years, with 5 to 7 to reach proficiency necessary for academic success. Yeah. Now, what do you do with somebody that's your age? Maybe 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, and above. Hasn't been to college in a long time. And now all of a sudden you come to college and you get this guy standing in front of you saying, okay, you got a 10-page paper due, has to be American Psychological Association manuscript. So anything less than APA, paper fails. And you're sitting there going like, what the hell is APA? Yeah, that's what we're talking about. So yeah, it's English, it's the English language, paragraphs, sentences, and all this stuff, but we have a problem, we have a difficulty. The major difference between boys and girls is the way adults respond to them. The way adults respond to them. Families headed by single women are more likely to be living in poverty than any other group, and that statistic is approximately 27%. That's pretty high. Many working class males develop patterns of resistance to schools and its authority figures because schooling is perceived as feminine and emphasizing mental rather than physical work. In some cultures, that's still the way it is. That's not a very good way of seeing things. Title IX of the 72 Education Amendments is the major legislation that addresses the civil rights of girls and women in the educational system, and that's still in effect today. The most controversial part of Title IX is the provision of equal opportunity in athletics. 847% increase in high school sports by females since Title IX started. So Title IX sits there and says you've got to be equal. When I went to high school, we only had a boys' judo club that I was a member of. Girls weren't allowed. It was only a boys' judo club. Now, as I go around and I take a look at different clubs, they're all boys and girls and everything else. It really doesn't matter. You know, part of this was, oh my gosh, you're wrestling on the mats, with a girl, and God forbid if your hands, as you're wrestling, you move around, you touch something that you shouldn't touch. What do you do? I'm sorry, but you're getting pinned. Done, finished. I'm going to win the match. You want to do me, and then you wrestle me. Fine. That's how it works. Sexual orientation. Sexual orientation is established in early life. Right? So is it a choice? No, it's established. That's different from a choice. Between 5 and 10% of the population is estimated to be lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender. Many cultural groups place high values on heterosexuality. 83% of the LGBT students report verbal harassment, 65% sexual harassment, 42% physical harassment, 21% physically assaulted, and 70% fear for their safety in schools, just because of who they are. And they have no choice in it. 49 million people, 19% of the population over the age of 5, have a disability. Some school systems require a decision whether a child is diploma bound by the end of kindergarten. 72% of people with disabilities have high school diplomas and 11% have a college diploma. Well, let me tell you something. Blow this out of the water, folks. All right? I was told in grade school, don't go to high school, you'll never make it. When I was in high school, I was told, don't go to college, you're not college bound, become a barber, you're really good at cutting hair, and I was, and I still am, but don't go to college, you'll never do it. I was told by my father that I was stupid. I was told by my college professors, don't go to college, you're not going to make it, you're not going to pass your bachelor's degree, you're not going to pass your master's degree. When I was in the seminary, one of my professors told me, oh, you can't go to the Holy Land because you don't speak Greek, Hebrew, Aramaic, or Sanskrit. You know why? Because you're stupid. Quote, unquote. That's what he told me. Okay? All of a sudden, I'm going for a second master's, and they're sitting there saying, well, you may not, but I think if you try hard enough, you can. So now I get my first doctorate. And they're sitting over there saying, wow, you're pretty good. There's certain things you got to do here. Fix this and fix that. And I fix this and I fix that, and I graduate. Second doctorate, no questions whatsoever. I graduated magna cum laude with distinguished honors. My third doctorate, that was a breeze. From somebody that was stupid and told they were stupid. If I would have bought into that, where would I be today? Some schools will sit there and say by academic testing, this person's got a low IQ, they're never going to make it into college. You want to make it, you want to do something, you can do it. But you're going to have to want to do it, you may have to work harder than somebody else. Not because you're a woman, not because you're black, not because you're Asian, but because that's what you have to do. That's what I had to do, and that's what you may have to do. We may not have it as easy as other people, but we're going to get what we want to get based on how we do it and how we go about it. If you want something, you can get something. That's what diversity is about. That's not what privilege is about. Privilege sits there and says, because you don't have it up here, you ain't going to be it. You're no good at it. So just give up. Lay down. That's privilege. White privilege? You ain't white, you ain't nothing. So just lay down. Let us handle it. It doesn't work that way. The integration of all students, regardless of their background or abilities, is all aspects of the educational process. We have to accept you. If you can't do it, we also have a duty to tell you No matter how hard you try, you can't do it. Let's look at something else. Now that's a possibility too, because not all of us have the ability to be academics, but all of us have the privilege to try. And all of us have the privilege, if we're not academics, to get counsel on where we're going to go and how we're going to do it. Inclusion regardless of race, ethnicity, gender, class, religion, physical or mental abilities, or language is where we need to be. Religion, although 88% of the population regard their religious beliefs as very or fairly important, less than half attend religious services on a weekly basis. And that's true. I have known in my congregation. A lot of people sit there and admire me and talk to me about theology and religion and, oh, this is great and wonderful and thank you very much. Why don't you come down on Sunday? I get nobody in church. And it's just that way. 56% of the population is Protestant, 2% Jewish, 27% Catholic. Many immigrants in the last 2 decades are Muslim, Hindu, or Buddhist. Right? Rural, 17% are now in poverty. That's called the invisible poor. This is to the large population. Suburban, half of the United States population, 20% of suburban children live in poverty. Urban, many immigrants live in urban areas and a high percentage of student populations are students of color. This is illustrative of a changing world and a changing society. White privilege is a menace to society. What is it? Being white means never having to think about it, right? A right advantage or immunity granted to or enjoyed by white persons beyond the common advantage of all others. An exemption in many particular cases from certain burdens or liabilities. This comes from the University of Ohio, Dayton. Basically, being white it means never to have to think about being white. White privilege is a set of advantages and or immunities that white people benefit from on a daily basis beyond those common to all others. White privilege can exist without white people's conscious knowledge of its presence, and it helps to maintain the racial hierarchy in this country. And that's from Dr. Avakian from the University of Massachusetts. So what is white privilege? White privilege, it's constructed. It's a resource you don't need to be aware of for it to be useful. It's just there. It's a resource that is very easy to ignore because of alternative explanations that are self-serving. It's pervasive, it's portable. Every social interaction in every social setting has a privilege component. Patricia Greenfield's lab at the University of California, Los Angeles, UCLA, first conscious reflective experience of white male privilege is what she looked at. And the impact of it? White privilege is an impact biased, and that implicates all of the other research we have on impact biases. Anthony Greenwald's work in 1990s on impact bias, impact association test is what he created, has brought to our attention effects of prejudicial thinking that may not be consciously or readily deductible in every action. Why? Because it's embedded. White privilege is embedded. You're white, we don't have to think about that because this is the norm. You're black, wait a minute, we got to think about that. You're Muslim, oh, wait a minute, we got to think about that. Not white. Greenwald believes that implicit biases themselves cannot be readily changed, but mindfulness of them, which by the way, I don't believe either, I think it can be changed, but he said it doesn't, but I don't agree with that. Mindfulness of them can affect whether or not they are put to action. The mindfulness is what changes it, because you've got to be mindful of the impact biases that we see in society. Once we're mindful that they exist, then we can recognize what they are, then we can change them. If we don't recognize them, then they can't be changed, because we don't even know they exist. So we have to be mindful, we have to be present, we've got to take a look at those links in the chain and move from there. So let's be clear and honest about it, right? Diminished expectations become a self-fulfilling prophecy. How? African Americans with same qualifications are given home loans with worse conditions. For example, the APR fixed or variable, Department of Justice settles with Sun Trust in 2012 because there was a problem with that. They tried to qualify African Americans differently than whites. African Americans get harsher sentences for identical drug-related charges versus the whites. United States Sentencing Report in 2013. I saw a lot of that at San Quentin, a lot of it. You know, one guy gets slapped on the wrist for little rock of cocaine. Black guy gets it. He's now got 10 years. Yo, yeah. The benefit of a college degree are greater for whites versus African Americans. Giddish says that at University of Michigan, 2015. If there's a difference between the same degrees and a white person and a black person are going for the job, who do you think gets the job? Same across the board. Same GPA, same honors, same degree, same knowledge base. The white guy gets it. This is white privilege. African Americans, Latino children are 2 to 13 times more likely to be removed from class for behavior, such as willful defiance, than whites. Skilba, Shore, and Williams in 2011, the Indiana Educational Policy Center for 2000 had these statistics. That's pitiful. So you get a white kid that causes trouble, they're just getting a little slap on the wrist. You get a Latino or an African American, they're troublemakers, kick them the hell out. That's white privilege. It's very imbalanced. And study after study, going all the way back to the pioneer work of Rosenthal and Jacobs in 1968, and replicated in more recent studies by McGowan and Weinstein in 2008, have found that teachers expect more out of their whites than their African American students. So diminished expectations become a self-fulfilling prophecy. So I'm just going to pass the black kid, I'm just going to pass the Latino kid, I don't care what you did, you're not going to do it anyway, but you, the white kid, I'm going to push you to get better than this kid over here. I'm setting the standard off for you. Finally, it's self-perpetuating. Social identity theory by Tajfel posits that much of our personal sense of identity or a sense of identifying is derived from our group membership. Tajfeld and Turner's work has confirmed a lot of this, right? Given that people want to feel good about themselves, they tend to inflate the standings of their own in-group and diminish other out-of-group ways. And whites, it's true that all groups, ethnic and otherwise, do this. If you are a member of the group that happens to be at the top of the economic and socio-political hierarchy, that self-enhancement is easier, more powerful, and more resistant to change. So the history of the phrase white privilege, right? In the modern understanding of the term and how it's typically used in present day, we can trace it back to Peggy McIntosh's women's study and professor at Wellesley, right? In 1987, she did a paper examining unlearned privilege. It was published in Liberal Education, which in turn was inspired by a lecture on white privilege, unpacking the invisible knapsack. Concept goes back much further, beginning with the critical examination of what it means to be white in America by W.E.B. Du Bois. The primary distinction between the old versus the new concept aligns with the explicit impact of demarcation. In the American of the pre-civil rights movement, white privilege simply meant the legal, economic, and political advantage not only posed by whites over African Americans, but the legal framework that guaranteed and protected those advantages. You were white, you were protected. You were black, you were not protected. Boy, some things never change, huh? At present, however, the term now connotes the unconscious absorption by people and institutions of a psychological bias that advantages whites. a psychological bias that advantages whites. So the culture is taking a look at this, and the advantage automatically goes to the whites without even thinking. That can be problematic, even if it's accurate, because it lets people off the hook. Even racists don't like to be called racists. So psychologically, we sit there and the bias goes towards the white, even if the bias is supposed to go towards the white. It's a problem because you're looked at as being racist, and even the racist, Ku Klux Klan, for example, doesn't want to be called racist. They want to be called righteous. It shifts responsibility from the conscious to the unconscious. So therefore, I don't really have to pay attention to it because I know what it is. It limits government role in addressing inequality. So recognizing it, and when I began to take a personal stand against it, work with the police. How do I deal with it in the classroom? Putting it on the table and in students' faces. We'll go back to that for a second. When you begin to take a personal stand against white privilege, work with the police. Why? Because if you ever want to see crime and punishment, and you want to see racism and prejudice in action, go for a ride. You'll see it. You'll see it in the neighborhoods. Watch TV. You'll see it in TV. Sometimes they're right, sometimes they're wrong. How do I deal with it in the classroom? Put it right there. Put it out there. Ladies and gentlemen, we're in a class, and I notice that a lot of you are multicultural. I welcome you into this classroom. Bam, it's out there. None of this, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to class. Let's get started. Today we're talking about cultural diversity, but none of us really want to deal with that because, we all know that because I'm white, my word says exactly what it's supposed to be, and that's it. Bye. Okay, have a nice day. Doesn't work that way. The critical race theory. Over time, white privilege is absorbed into the institutional matrix of our country, even into our built environment. After World War II, housing restrictions, distribution of environmental pollution, green, recreation spaces, etc. were all white-based. Given that, it's good to understand a bit about critical race theory. Bell and Freeman, 1998, has some very good writings on this. Essentially, the idea that the individual racist need not exist for institutional racism to remain pervasive in the minority culture. They don't have to exist, it's already there, right? It also implicates arguments of egalitarian and mediocrity, and this helps us understand whether what we should be seeking is equal treatment alone versus social equality for historically disadvantaged groups. Moynihan report 1965 is where this came out. This is back in 1965, right? We should be seeking equal treatment alone versus social inequality, both. Social equality as well as equal treatment alone. They should be blended together. But because of white privilege, it's separated. So what's to be done? Long pronounced, long delayed, long overdue discussion of race in this country will not happen on its own. All right? It has to be an emergent process. It has to come out. It will not succeed if only the deposed and the aggrieved push the agenda. So minorities can't push this on their own. They need everybody to push this. Right? It's a shame to say, but it's true. You can have a big voice. What do you call it? The racial wars and racial battles back in the 60s from Dr. Martin Luther King, all that stuff. Yes, that started the whole uprising, which it should have, on discrimination and the rights of African Americans. And that never should have happened. They should have had the rights already. We all should. But yet you have the white privilege sitting there and saying, no, marginalize, put them where they need to be. So you got to get the whites with privilege to talk to the African Americans and everybody else. You need everybody to come together and sit there and say, this is wrong. We need to integrate, not segregate. We need to integrate, bring people together. Let our ideas be shared. Your ideas are just as bad as mine and just as good as mine. This is where it has to start. White folk must use what amounts to the only moral benefit of their privilege. Right? In a word, you must force issues in whatever domains you have a voice to do so. You've got to speak up. Discrimination, racism, ethnicism is wrong. You've got to be able to say it. You're going to find this in your clinics, your schools, your hospitals, your work, everything. Talk about it, articulate it, bring subtext to the surface fearlessly with the correct intent. The ability to do this without being impugned is earned over time, right? Make the students grapple with it. Make people grapple with it. Talk about it in your churches, your synagogues. Bear witness, acknowledge, call things by their rightful names. This Greek over here says ten, agathis, gothen, scaphe, legantas. Call things by their grateful names. Ten, scaphes, akephen, legates. Come full circle again with the police. Ask questions. Don't assume. Be mindful. Be vigilant. So this gives us a starting point on race, culture, and discrimination. Is it the end, or is it a new beginning? Well, I want to thank you for your time and your efforts and for being here. I hope you got something out of this and take the message with you. Racism is not good. We need to grow as a country, as a nation, and as a people. For Intercoast College and the Addictions Program, I'm Dr. Tony Scuderi. Have a great rest of your day or night.